should have all gotten the notification that we're recording, so thank you all. I'm gonna throw a quick agenda on the screen, and then we're gonna go to Chris. Oh, and here's Celeste from PHA. Hey, Celeste, how are you?
Good, thanks.
All right. Hopefully everybody can see that lovely art. As renowned artist put that together right there on that first slide. But I was responsible. I'm giving away the game for putting this agenda together, and I'm really excited for today's meeting. So we're going to start with an overview from one of our members here, somebody that I consider a close advisor, Professor Chris Ali, formerly of the University of Virginia and now over at Penn State. We're going to talk about digital equity in Virginia, kind of give a high-level overview, as well as the role of philanthropy in addressing issues of digital equity. Really exciting stuff, including a kick out to talk about funding. So everybody's favorite topic. It's one of the things that if you're in the circles that I'm in, this is what we're talking about now. We're not talking about just like the theory. We're not talking about like ideas that somebody has. Everybody cuts to the chase, and just as soon as you send an email to the chat, like, what do you guys think about this? Or I'm doing this. Everybody wants to know funding. Where'd you get your funding? And then we're going to talk about some pilot opportunities, authoring. It's time to start writing. And then, as always, just have an opportunity for anybody to share any other thoughts that they have, any closing comments. I do want to introduce Rebecca Payne. I'm not going to make you turn your camera on if you don't want. Rebecca Payton, I'm sorry. I don't. If you don't have to turn your camera on if you don't want to, but I wanted to introduce Rebecca Payton from TJ ACE. That's the Thomas Jefferson Adult and Continuing Education. I believe I got that right. So we got a chance to meet with TJ ACE yesterday, and it was a really fast put together meeting, courtesy of Ridge Schuyler, who I think everybody's probably is aware of from Network to Work, which is like Network to Work is just such an incredible example of workforce empowerment, that it's now actually the model that the state is going to be using and expanding and iterating on for a statewide effort. So just an incredible organization there. We got to meet with them. We got to learn from Ridge that they're doing the most important part about digital equity work. They're asking people whether they have a connection, whether they can afford a connection, whether they have a device, and whether they feel like they need digital skills training. And almost all of them say, yes, we need digital skills training. And almost all of them then get referred to TJ ACE, who, for the last a long time, has actually been doing digital skills training, not just sit down classes where they have separate time to learn digital skills, but in their everyday, every time they get a student, they sit them down in front of a computer and they have to walk them through how to use a computer and how to do different things on the computer in order to complete these online classes. So just a great example of how the work that we're doing here, a lot of it is just developing relationships that then show us that we've uncovered another rock and we found another nugget of treasure, and then we can bring that to the table and we can say, okay, guys, let's work together on this. Let's find something really exciting to do. So, Rebecca, do you want to just take a minute and share about TJ ACE, and in particular, share about the clientele that you guys serve?
So a lot of the population that we serve is also the population that Network to Work serves. These are typically people who have barriers, and oftentimes it's the same sort of barriers to employment, but barriers to education. These are adults who need childcare services, who need transportation services, who need digital literacy skills. Um, and our goal is to help them get the education that they need to get into employment that will be self-sustaining for themselves and their families. Um, the great thing about partnering now with the regional digital equity plan stuff is that um, our primary work is working with individuals who do not have a high school diploma, and also working with individuals who need English classes. And that's a lot of our funding is dependent on how we're reaching those people, and who is improving their English skills, who's improving their reading skills, who's earning the GED. And so some of our funding, we're limited to how many computer classes we could have. If we can get additional funding from somewhere else, we could offer more computer classes. And like he was saying, we try to incorporate digital literacy skills in every single class that we have. If it's our reading language arts class for GED, they are learning how to get on a computer so that they can log into GED.com and create an account and schedule their ready test and their official test. They're learning how to email with their teachers back and forth. So we're incorporating it into whatever class they go into. And
Thank
so
you.
that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. And I want to emphasize two things about TJ Ace. One, they really love their students. They are not just trying to churn people through a process and get them out the door. They want to keep them. They want to keep them as long as they possibly can because they really care about their students. But the other thing is, we've got about a dozen people on a call. We've got 50 people get my email talking about these meetings, and I bother more than that every month. When you walk in to TJ Ace there at Ix, don't make an appointment. Just stop by and tell them that I said it's okay, and just go inside. And on the right, you're going to see this big bulletin board, and it's got like 30 people on it, and they are all part-time staff who teach these classes. It's not a whole, a small core group of people that dedicate 120 hours a week. It's actually a lot of people dedicating a little bit of time to really make a big impact in people's lives. And so that's the kind of stuff that I love. I love that because it also means that if we can find a way to expand this digital literacy footprint that TJ Ace has, they've got a whole bunch of instructors that might be able to stretch themselves just a little bit more and help out, or recruit a few more instructors, grow that pool by just a little bit, and you could have a big impact. So with that, thank you, Rebecca. I'd like to throw it over to Chris. Chris, if you want to introduce yourself again to the group, and then we can get started.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Christopher Alley. I had spent the last 9 years in Charlottesville at the University of Virginia, and just this last year moved to State College, Pennsylvania, where I'm a professor of telecommunications. And I've known Jason and Mike for a number of years now. And was assisting Jason in some of the focus groups and planning for that we did this spring. Really exciting that Jason asked me to talk about some digital equity opportunities in Virginia, and then to reflect a little bit on a report I wrote last year with the Virginia Funders Network, looking at what the role of local philanthropic groups can be in digital equity and broadband deployment in the Commonwealth. So I put together, a couple of slides just to help us walk through what is going on. There we go. Can everybody see my slides all right? I've got the closed captioning on too. My plan, let's see if this is gonna work for us? There we go. Want to talk just a bit of a high overarching view of what the state is doing in terms of digital equity. Then talk a little bit about philanthropic groups and what communities can do in partnerships with philanthropic groups. So this was really exciting. So I've been out of Virginia for 6 months now, and this was a great opportunity for me to dive back into the policy world for Virginia. And of course, things are moving incredibly quickly, both at the state level and at the federal level. We've got this $2.75 billion in digital equity funding that will be coming down the pipes in the next 6 months. So Virginia has started to think about that. DHCD and the Broadband Office, they're charged with crafting and administering the state digital equity plan. For those of you who don't know, in order to access this money at the federal level, states need to have both a 5-year broadband deployment plan and a digital equity plan. This can be kind of wrapped up into one plan. And in Virginia, it's the Department of Housing and Community Development office that is in charge of that, and that's who houses our broadband office. And they just announced what they're calling a digital opportunity case study pilot program. And this is what I wanted to focus on just in a few minutes. So this is coming from some seed funding from the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and to start the process. And they have a planning grant for state digital equity planning grant program. And what the Commonwealth of Virginia is using this money for is to identify best practices of initiatives and efforts to address the digital divide throughout the Commonwealth. So they're looking at funding programs to the extent of $10,000, and the deliverable is a case study, right? And the idea is that this case study would help fuel the digital equity grants program that the state will be administering. I haven't exactly seen how much money the state is going to get from the digital equity money, but it's going to be substantial. Applications are going to be processed on a rolling basis until all funds are committed. So, for those of you who are thinking about moving into the digital equity space in terms of programmatic responsibilities, or who already have a program going, this is a great opportunity. $10,000 is nothing to sneeze at. And I did take a look at the application process, and it's a pretty light list. So it's very doable, very, very doable. This is really small, so I'm just going to go ahead and read this for y'all. So who's eligible to apply for this money? It's community anchor institutions, it's county, municipal, and tribal governments, local education agencies, nonprofit organizations, organizations that represent individuals with disabilities, aging individuals, individuals with language barriers, individuals in the state who are incarcerated in facilities other than federal correctional facilities. And I was excited to see that, because oftentimes incarcerated folks, we tend to not think about them when it comes to broadband planning. Civil rights organizations, entities that carry out workforce development programs, agencies of the state that are responsible for administering or supervising adult education and literacy services, public housing authorities, and any partnerships between any of these entities described above. So it's a pretty holistic eligibility criteria. So, I would love for us in future conversations to be thinking about, are there any opportunities for some partnerships around digital equity programs? Does anyone have any questions about that? I'm happy, or would it be better if maybe we did question and answer afterwards?
Let's push question and answer towards we'll both have a little session of talking, and then we'll open it up for questions. But truly, if anybody wants to interrupt, obviously, just unmute yourself and
please
go for
it. Go ahead. Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. And very much so, I'll just go back here. There's some great opportunities for some partnerships ahead with this money. And this money is just the tip of the digital equity money iceberg. As we're going forward. So 3 more things just to be, just for your radar. Virginia is working through its 5-year broadband plan and its digital equity plan. And of course, as we all know on this call, what Virginia is doing for its digital equity plan is kind of deputizing regional entities to develop county and regional digital equity plans. So that's how that's going to be developed. So these are things to be watching as we go forward. Alrighty, moving on. So the second part is, actually, I think dovetails really nicely with, how we can access some of this money, which is last year, I was commissioning a funders network, which is the umbrella organization for local philanthropic organizations throughout the Commonwealth. And I was commissioned by them to write a report on the state of broadband in the Commonwealth, and then also to ponder what funders and philanthropists can do to address digital divides. And this became this report. And once I'm done with this presentation, I'll put the link to the report in the chat for everybody. So, the major takeaways is that, of course, we're all stakeholders in this digital divide, and that Virginia funders have played and will continue to play crucial roles in achieving Virginia's connectivity and digital equity goals. We did 3 case studies of what local philanthropic groups are doing right now. And again, this is very much at the local level. And this is really what excited me, is that these groups can mobilize capital pretty quickly and for really targeted programs. And so the Cameron Foundation in Petersburg, Virginia, leveraged some of its funding to do a grant match for the area that won a VATI award. The Path Foundation in Warrenton developed or funded a hotspot loan program. And the Harvest Foundation in Martinsville funded a study and then also provided a matching grant. So, if we're thinking through who might be a really good partner to maybe access some of the digital equity money from the state, or even just to go it alone and see if is there local philanthropic money available. I do think in my, judging from my conversations last year, that local philanthropic groups are eager to do much more than they've already been doing. And these three organizations have already devoted well over $2 million together towards connectivity, hotspot programs, studies, and digital equity programming. The report ended with a series of recommendations for communities and for funders, particularly thinking through strategic partnerships. And so we kind of divided them between what can stakeholders do right now, like right as we get off the call, what can we do, and what will involve a little bit more planning in the future. So I'm just going to go through those recommendations before I toss it back to Jason here. So, thinking through deployment, what if my community does not have connectivity at all? It is quite easy for local philanthropic groups and strategic partnerships to identify community connectivity needs, identify digital champions, train their digital navigators. I mean, we all know this, right? Mapping and engaging with elected officials. Local philanthropic groups might want to also engage in partnerships and matching grants. What we're seeing, particularly at the deployment level, is we're going to need a 25% matching grant. And this is something that philanthropic groups can really be essential stakeholders in. If the community is partially connected, we can think about bringing providers and community members together. And this is absolutely crucial as Virginia is working through its 5-year digital connectivity plan, 5-year broadband plan, because by law, that plan has to engage with localities, regions, counties, and tribal nations. So this is an opportunity for us all to muster our communities to be part of this conversation to facilitate Virginia's 5-year broadband plan. If we're looking less about the deployment stage and more about the affordability, there's obviously the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. I know Jason has talked to us all about what the county is doing to augment ACP. And then, of course, ACP is going to run out next year. So there's also a lot of conversations that need to be going on about renewing and revamping the ACP to make sure that it is an ongoing program. What local community groups can do is that to make sure that local providers are participating, they can themselves do affordability programs and they can continue to speak with boards of supervisors. Now, in terms of digital equity training, I think where philanthropic groups can do some amazing work is in the assessment of community needs and training. So in the report, we talked a lot about philanthropic groups sponsoring, for instance, digital navigator programs throughout the Commonwealth. That is something that can very easily be achieved, kind of immediately. Right, and to identify those who are already doing digital champion work and then also doing digital navigator training. One of my favorite examples of this is actually going on in upstate New York, where in Orleans County, the YMCA funded, I think it was YMCA and United Way funded digital navigator training for Meals on Wheels drivers. And I just think this is an incredible opportunity to bring folks who would not really think of themselves as stakeholders in digital equity to the table, right? Meals on Wheels drivers are the ones engaging with homebound folks with often elderly and those needing special assistance. And by training them as digital navigators, they can really do that kind of essential assisting with kind of this digital equity and training programming. So I love this kind of thinking out of the box, and I would love to see that type of program replicated in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Last but not least, just to remind everyone that, of course, this is an all hands on deck situation to solve Virginia's digital divides, both in terms of the connectivity and the digital equity component. And again, local communities, folks on this call, local philanthropic groups can play a tremendous role. And again, we just love to see us marshal these connections and these partnerships a little bit more, because there's money available both from the state and from these philanthropic groups. And the philanthropic groups are eager to do more in the digital equity space. So with that in mind, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to turn it back over to Jason, and I'm also happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
I'm going to fess up to everybody. If any of that stuff that he just talked about looks familiar, if that sequence of things that you do and that you address looks familiar, last summer I read this paper and I looked at his slides and I watched his presentation before VFN. I said, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. And so we have been addressing things bit by bit, getting the connectivity piece taken care of, getting the affordability piece taken care of, and bringing together community-based organizations like you all to start to do those community needs assessments and the training. Those pieces are the ones that that we always knew we weren't going to be able to do alone. And so we just followed Chris's lead, and that's why I found him really valuable to keep as an advisor with us, and also to talk to you guys. So I want to start by talking about the planning process, and then spend a little bit of time actually just revisiting some of the things that Chris just talked about in a couple of different ways. So yes, perfect. Thanks, Chris. So the link to the report itself is in the chat, and you all should read it. It really is fantastic. I've sent it out around a number of times. So the planning process isn't some sort of mysterious thing. It's something that is also not unique to urban planning or to digital planning. This is what management consultants do. This is what designers do. This is what salesmen do. And it starts the same way every time, and that's with a assessment of the current state. What are we doing right now? And then a dreamscape. And those are the two things. You want them to happen side by side because you want people to actually have that contrasting element of being able to look at what their current state is and what their dream situation would be. And then the planner takes that home and then comes up with a plan for how to get from the current state to the dreamscape. That is the process in a nutshell, and that's what we're doing with digital equity. And so when we're thinking about this upcoming conversation, I want you guys to be thinking for your clients, for your populations, for the spaces that you encounter, for your leadership. What's their dreamscape? What is it in a digital equity space? What is it that they want to see? Would be the dream side scenario, because ultimately that's what we want to create a plan for. And so with that, I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret, and that's that these ridiculous drawings that everybody's been looking at every month, I did those. I drew those, and I wanted to bring that up because clearly I am not a designer or an artist. So as we start to move into the authoring phase, where we're going to actually create a document, I'm going to need help. And to stress that, I decided to make a timeline. And you all saw Chris's slides. He's got a little bit of a design hand and arranging things on the slide. This is my timeline. And it is actually just all the things that Chris just talked about. So this is basically, including 2023, the next 5 years. And it's the next 5 years of what's going to happen in the digital equity space from a funding perspective. And we're going to start all the way on the right, and you see BEAD. So Chris talked about Virginia's 5-year plan. That is actually tied to a BEAD proposal. So the BEAD is, we talked about it last month, the Broadband Equity Adoption and Deployment Act, fund, whatever you want to call it, program. And it's a lot of words: broadband, equity, adoption, and deployment. Those are actually almost all separate. They're separate pieces. And the deployment part comes first. Deployment means access, putting conduit in the ground, putting fiber in the ground, getting homes connected. So as you see, we've got BEAD year 5 through year 2, but not year 1. Year 1 is going to go towards deployment. The BEAD process has begun. We have the map that the BEAD funding allocations are going to be based off of. Based on that map, we have a pretty good idea of how much funding Virginia is going to get. And we also have a pretty good idea of how much the problem is going to cost. So how much is it going to cost to address the remaining roughly 100,000 locations in Virginia? And knowing those two things, we know now there's going to be money left over. That leftover money doesn't just go away. Instead, it gets applied to the other letters in BEAD, equity and adoption. So there's going to be money for affordability programs, device programs, training programs. There's going to be money for a lot of different aspects of digital equity. And that's going to come, like I said, in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. Conveniently, as Chris mentioned, starting in about 6 months, but really if money's not going to flow until probably next summer, we're going to have the Digital Equity Act funds available. The Digital Equity Act comes in 2 flavors. That's the state, which is about $1.44 billion that's going to be distributed, again, through an equation to all of across the states. So, Virginia is going to get a fraction of $1.44 billion, but that's where that digital equity plan that the state is putting together is so important. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for taking that meeting. I will join you when this is over. That's where the digital opportunity plan, the digital equity plan is so important, because what gets funded through the state's Digital Equity Act funds is going to be defined in that plan. The second piece is about $1.25 billion that's going to be up for grabs competitively for programs such as for programs and coalitions such as ours that wants to fund specific projects that are that maybe aren't going to fit inside of the state's plans, or maybe they are a little bit too different, they're a little out there, but is a great opportunity. And so there's, like Chris said, about $2.75 billion that's going to be available through that. And so you see, we've got the Digital Equity Act, then we've got BEAD Year 2, BEAD Year 3, BEAD Year 4, BEAD Year 5, and we're back all the way up to kind of that first up and down line. Up until now, we've been doing research largely. We've been doing focus groups. We've been doing statistical analysis. Mike and I have been playing with maps. We've been talking to you all and learning so much from you all. We're moving into that authoring space where we're going to be putting the plan together. And if you look, there's a line there that we're going to end authoring. That's when we're going to have a plan. It seems a little ambitious, but that line, that's in October. I really want us to be done with our plan in October. We know the major factors that are behind, that are barriers to digital equity in our area right now. Device access, and in particular, the ones that aren't being addressed right now. Device access, fear, and digital literacy skills. We know ways to address those individually. So it's time for us to put that on paper and make some progress in this plan. But then you see there's a gap. We publish the plan, and then we just sit on our hands for 8, 9, 10 months until the funding starts coming. And this is why I wanted to have Chris come and talk about funding. Because what if instead we start thinking today about what kind of an impact could we have on a small basis? What kind of an impact could we have if we just tried to do something small now that would prove out the model for what we want to do? And to that end, let's look at what it looks like to think about funding, or to think about a pilot. So again, we're talking about dreamscaping. You take your current state, you take your dreamscape, and then you find out how to get there. And you start with, what are you doing? So what are you doing right now in the digital equity space? It might be a lot, and possibly more than you can really handle. TJ Ace is a great example of, like, they're doing it every single day, and that's awesome. It might be, I think we don't have anybody from Java today, but Java, has had fits and starts of giving out devices, doing some digital skills training, they have, I kid you not, there's a volunteer that goes to each of the senior centers once a month. During each of the different days, the senior center has different people, different days, and he goes once a month to just do tech support. So they tell the clients, are you having trouble with your iPad, your laptop? Do you need somebody to replace the batteries in something? Just bring it to the senior center on that day when Vishal is going to be there, and he will help you. He will help take care of that for you. So what are you doing right now? What do you want to do? What is that dreamscape scenario? What is that next thing? And then you got to ask the hard questions. Who's it going to involve? Current staff, new staff, partners, volunteers. Where is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Can you do it now? Like, if all of a sudden you had money to do it, could you just do it, or is it going to take time to ramp up? Is there going to be a lead time that you need to address? And how much is it going to cost? How much is the most important piece? And again, we're talking Dreamscape, but we're also talking, and that's where that second row comes, small ball and growing. So what does it look like to put together a pilot? A pilot would be a fraction of what you want to do, but this is how we get started. If we have a few pilots that we can prove the model of, when it comes time to tell the state, hey, this is what we want to fund out of the state dollars, we've got an opportunity to really just prove it out and say, we've already done it. We've done it for 4 months. We've done it for 6 months. This is the outcome. If we want to go for some of those competitive grants, and maybe we've got somebody's got an idea here that is a little off track, but it's really in line with our mission. Maybe that's a pilot that we can find a funder for, and then we can work to find an opportunity to create a competitive grant application from that. The other opportunity that it gives us is, what if what you need is a way to put the who together, a way to fund an opportunity for stakeholders to get together and just interact and go through a separate planning process. Those are all things that funders are still interested in, funding collaborative efforts. The work of just putting groups of people together to come to a decision, to come to an agreement about how to address something. Those are things that are all on the table for state funding. The State Digital Opportunity case study, it is out there. It's small, $10,000, and we can talk about that one again in just a second. But this is the way that I really want us to move forward over the next few weeks and months, is working on the authoring, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and where our needs are going to be there. But also, I really want all of our community partners to be thinking about some big things they want to do, and how we can start by just taking a bite out of that and giving it a trial, and what that would look like and what that would cost. So I'm going to back up. Chris, do you mind putting your slides back up? And you can go to the Digital Opportunity Plan one, and we're going to talk about that one for just a little bit.
Sorry, just give me 1 sec
Yeah.
as I exited out of PowerPoint.
Oh.
So I just need to pull that back up for quickly. There we go. There, and then share.
I need a digital literacy class on desktop management. I have probably 250 tabs open and 25, 30 apps open at all times. And I actually have them spread out across 5 or 6 desktops, which does not help, because then when you're like looking for that one, you're just like, wait, which desktop is it on? Oh, now I can't find anything. Yes, so this one. So this is an interesting one, and this was a great effort by the state. The state decided to put this together because they received a little over $1 million for planning. They knew they wanted to hire a consultant, and they also knew that they had money left over. So they just said, okay, well, let's just put this money in a pocket. We don't know how much it's going to be. We don't actually know how much money is going to end up in this pocket. We just know that there's going to be money left over. So let's set it aside whenever it's available, and let's put a case study program together. And unfortunately, then they couldn't get it launched. So the original end date was August 1st, and it technically still is the end date. If you apply for this, they want you to have a complete case study done, and have your funding in hand for August 1st. And I'm not here, and none of the state is here right now. I'm not going to pick on them. They had the situation, they had the hand that was dealt to them. They had delays in getting their proposal out, and they had a hard date for when that proposal needed to end. Not one that they chose, but just a very hard date for when that needed to end. Now, today, if you all go to them and say, I really want $10,000 to fund something, they're not going to tell you no. What they'll tell you is, if you can get us a case study before your pilot's over, a proposal basically before your pilot's over, we'll probably still fund you. We looked at it, and we actually looked at it for 2 programs that we have already launched, the RDEP and the ACP Bridge. We were going to write case studies for them on that. and we're still going to do it. What we determined, though, is $10,000 sourced from federal locations, federal funds. It was too small of an amount of money and too high of a potential reporting need. And so this is where the urge, when you've got these projects, and maybe $10,000 is the right size, maybe $20,000, maybe $50,000, maybe 1% of your operating budget, maybe 10% of your operating budget, could really be game changing for a subset of your clients. Maybe private funding would be a better choice. Private funding doesn't come with the reporting requirements. It comes with reporting requirements, but it doesn't come with sort of the onerous reporting requirements of federal grants. I'm currently involved. I know many of you deal with federal grants. I'm currently involved in just getting one started. And we have 4 different portals. One for financial reporting, one for grants management, one for outcomes reporting, and then one for I don't know, but I need an account for it anyways. And that's killing me. So this is why when we're thinking about these pilots, I want you guys to be thinking about the possibility that we can work with some private funders and do some matchmaking. See if we can find a funder that is interested in your project. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with regards to this is that the state has actually done the exact same thing with a bigger pot of money that's associated with BEAD. They haven't rolled it out yet, and I think that they're just trying to set the bumpers for how this is going to work. And this plays to the conversation that I just had about what if you just need funding to get a group of people together and come up with a proposal. They want to use $3 million of BEAD planning funds to roll out a similar offer. Communities and community organizations, really just want to be able to sit down together and figure out what are they going to do for the next 5 years in the digital equity space. And so the state wants to shake loose some funds to help communities do that and to help community partners and coalitions do that. I am absolutely eager for them to release that and just bring that to our table. So maybe we can get a little bit of funding to hire a designer, so that way you guys don't have to see my horrible drawings anymore. But those are the sorts of things that they're looking at ways to help communities and coalitions put together plans for these sorts of things. Having our sequencing of how we want to do our funding is great already, right? That puts us ahead of the game. And I'm going to crow about now that Mike's off the call because he doesn't like it when I sing his praises, but I'm going to crow about our office and Mike. You know, the reason that I'm here and the reason that we can all sit together and work on these issues is because unlike almost any other county in Virginia, any other municipality in Virginia, we're almost at universal access. We have an affordability plan already in place. We are ahead of the game. We're ahead of the state. We're ahead of any other county in Virginia. We're ahead of a lot of counties across the country. The Digital Equity Act and the BEAD funding, those were all originally targeted at areas where there isn't a plan and there aren't staff that are dedicated to this. So this is where I just get really excited because we can really be pushing these boundaries and finding new things to do. And a lot of it, again, is stuff that you guys are already doing that we want to help you increase your capacity for. All right, Chris, if you want to take your slides off, I've got one more slide, and that's when we're going to talk about authoring. And why am I calling it authoring? Because I don't want anybody to think that they have to write. Authoring means lots of things. So many clicks. There we go. Authoring. So what do we need to do? We're still going to do two really big engagement activities. We're going to do a survey. This is, again, it's a continuation of a survey that Mike and I have been running for years. Mike has been running since 2017. This is going to include a speed test, and it's going to include questions about affordability, reliability, and digital literacy skills. That's going to be for everybody. we want everybody to take it. If you live in a great neighborhood in a big house with lots of access and with a high-tech job, we still want you to take it. We want everybody to take it. The other one is going to be the asset inventory. And this is something I've been kind of dragging my feet on because I really don't like any of the ones that are out there. I don't like the one that the state produced. So if you've received it, fill it out. The state's going to give us that data too. And maybe I'm just going to cave and I'm just going to settle and I'm just going to go ahead and recreate the state's one, but with our logo. So that way everybody knows that it's ours. But the asset inventory is important. Because it's that current state. So it answers that question from over here. What are you doing? And I'm going to add, because I think it matters to this sort of a planning process, is what do you want to do? So I'm going to add to the state survey, and why I still think I'm going to probably push out our own, that second question of the dreamscaping question. So that way, not only are you going to tell us what you're currently doing, but you're also going to tell us what you would like to do. What is your goal? And those are going to be the engagement activities, but we've still got enough to work on what we know. So what we need are writers. If that's not you, that's fine. If it's not you, I still might force you to be for it to be you, because I need as many people to help me with this as possible. We also need readers. Readers are important in these sorts of documents because I have sat down and written 35 pages that did great in front of an academic audience. It was horrible. It took 2 days and I didn't sleep. But it did great in front of academic audiences. But it was a terrible thing to read if you're just a member of the public that just wants to learn something. And so we need readers to look at different sections as we write them, to ensure that they're accessible, to ensure that they make sense, and to make sure that nothing gets missed. We need stories. I mentioned this to the TJ Ace team yesterday, but whatever digital equity space you're working in, success stories and failures are important to hear about and to highlight in a plan like this. The reality is that this plan is an influential document to funding decision makers. Having that kind of awareness, we know a story about something that was successful is going to be helpful. A story about something that did not work out and the lessons that you learned from it, those are also really helpful to convincing funders that you are somebody that can be trusted to do a good job with these funds. We obviously need designers. Just look at this slide. The green box isn't centered on the screen anywhere. This is terrible. And we need evangelists. So this is everybody. Every single one of you needs to be an evangelist. If you're not going to be, I'm going to force you. But we need evangelists. And the evangelists here means that whatever your leadership structure is, maybe you're at the top, maybe there's somebody above you, whatever your leadership structure is, we need you guys talking to your leaders about the importance of this work, the opportunities present in this work. We need you talking to colleagues in other groups and other agencies that maybe aren't at this table, telling them the importance of this and why, even if they don't think they're doing digital equity work, maybe they should come to a meeting, maybe they should read this draft, maybe they should contribute in some way, shape, or form. That's the most important job. So I'm going to now kick it to Chris, that way if he has any additional comments, anything that I said that we need to correct, and then open it up to questions.
No, I mean, this is great. I first of all, I think you sell yourself short. Your drawings are amazing and you're bringing us all together. So like, you as an architect of all of this deserve a round of applause, Jason. So don't, there's a book in this for you with your artwork, digital equity artwork.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. This is coffee table.
Incredibly.
This is coffee table worthy, right? Everybody wants this on their coffee table.
Yeah, I do. I certainly do. But it goes without saying that you can sign me up to be a writer and all of those things.
I appreciate that. Anybody else? Anybody have any questions for Chris? I think one of the things I had hoped, and Chris, maybe you can quickly cheat and look at your notes, is actually that overview of the problem. We know in Albemarle County we're unique. We have a plan in place to get us universal access. We have an idea of where the pockets of difficulty in the city in terms of areas that may still struggle for access. But across the state, what is the current landscape for connectivity and affordability in particular?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I'm going to go off the top of my head. I do know that last year it turned out that we identified way more communities that were and underconnected than we had originally thought. So that came as a bit of a surprise to a number of folks. Let me get you the actual numbers. Sorry, give me 1 second. This is like when I testified before the Senate and Senator Cruz asked me to the dollar the amount of money ever spent on broadband, and I was like, I have no idea. Here we go. 441,435 households in Virginia are unserved or underserved. And in terms of affordability, I don't know, Jason, if I have that number off the top of my head, but I think one of the things I think that's really important to be asking is I actually think when we're looking at these numbers, it is so important, and Jason, you emphasized this at the beginning, to be asking people what they can and cannot do with their connections and what they want to be able to do. I think that tells us, I mean, yes, the speed tests are important because we got to have a dot on a map, but it's also about the experience. I mean, networks are useless unless people can do what they want to be able to do with it. So when we're thinking about those kind of impact assessments and what's going on, asking folks like, and actually I've moved away from when I talk to my students, asking them, I don't ask them to do speed tests anymore. I ask them, can we have a Zoom conversation? Can you download a PowerPoint? Can you binge Murder, She Wrote when you want to watch Murder, She Wrote? Like, what are the things that you can, what can't you do that someone else can do and you can't do? I think is a really important question. The other thing I'll just plug for Virginia, which Virginia is doing comparatively in this country so well with their planning. And again, I say this, I'm glad hopefully no one from Pennsylvania is listening to this call, but Pennsylvania is so behind the ball. And this is something that I'm learning right now. And I didn't realize how spoiled the conversations I was having these conversations in Virginia, because I can guarantee you this, Pennsylvania is not having the type of conversation that we're having right now. And that places it at a deficit when it's trying to mobilize this amount of money that's going to come through the pipes. So, there's a lot of work to be done still, but Virginia is really one of the trendsetters throughout the country on broadband and digital equity planning and thinking and policymaking. So yeah, those are just the two more things that I'll add. But right now, yeah, we're looking at about 400,000 people who are unserved and underserved. And the definition of unserved is that you have either zero connection or you don't have a connection that allows you to get to 25 megabits per second download, 3 megabits per second upload. You'll often see this depicted as 25/3. That's the magic number. It's already too low. We know this, but this is the number that the federal government has said. That's what. And when Jason was talking about the BEAD program, the first track of money goes specifically to unserved areas. Underserved means communities or areas that aren't getting upwards of 100 down, 20 up, 100/20. That's a much more number if you live, if anyone other than just you and your dog are using the internet. The average American household has 11 connected devices inside the house. I just bought a washer and dryer that texted me. I literally just got a text from my dryer. That gobbles up bandwidth, not as much as this conversation that we're having right now, but we have to think about all these devices add up. And that's how we can quite easily get to or exceed 25/3. So when we're talking about that, really we want to be making sure that folks are at 120 or higher. Electric cooperatives in Virginia are doing some amazing work. Throughout the Commonwealth, the kind of trendsetter here is CVEC, the Central Virginia Electric Cooperative in Nelson County, with their Firefly broadband product. But if you look at the areas that are particularly and underserved, it's the cooperative who is looking into making moves in that area. So, these are great conversations to be having with cooperatives, because they're also the ones who are winning a ton of broadband money. Yep. So if you're looking for partners, they might be a great partner. The other thing I'll throw in, and I just learned this country is short 250,000 technicians when it comes to broadband. It's not just the installers, but it's the upkeep and the management as well. So if there's workforce development programming that you're thinking about doing, partnering with an ISP can be tremendous, because it is I don't want to say it's a guaranteed job, nothing is guaranteed, but these are well-paying jobs that are sustainable and will be sustainable long after the federal money has been rolled out. So 250,000 technicians we
Absolutely.
are short of. And that doesn't need a 4-year Bachelor of Engineering degree, right? We can get this done through vocational training, through community colleges, through apprenticeship work as well. So there's a tremendous opportunity for workforce development as part of this larger conversation of digital equity. Sorry, now I'm just rambling, but I'll
that was perfect. Jen, and then I will add to something you just said there, Chris.
Thanks, Chris and Jason. Chris, I actually sent your report to a local foundation, because I was like, oh, this will make it easy for you to give us lots of money. So thank you for that. And my question is, well, I had a question, then I got so excited about your workforce idea just now that I got a little distracted. But so training digital navigators, Jason's going to launch 2 digital navigators to push ACP. We're going to partner as a health district to expand the outreach of that project. But also a project that I'm working on takes all of RDEP organizations and says, let's look at all programs and bolster as many as we can across the board, particularly libraries. I couldn't tell from your rainbow list, were libraries part of the ones that are eligible for these grants? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, they fall under the community anchor institutions umbrella. That would be library, health centers, faith-based organizations. Yeah, they are absolutely. I mean, librarians are the heroes of digital navigation. They've been doing this work for centuries, and it's all of us who are now just catching up. So librarians are amazing. But yes, absolutely, they are eligible. There's also another pot of money that I just discovered, actually. If you want to get federal money, again, Jason's quite right, it comes with a lot of reporting, but Museum and Library Services has just launched another grant opportunity specifically targeting librarian communities. So if you're looking at that kind of partnership, IMLS, I say this because I'm getting ready to apply for some money from them. So there is a grant opportunity going on there for some programming.
Amazing. And then one last question, Jason, when you're thinking about the Genie Lamp wish list and the planning and what to go after, we're thinking of that collectively as RDEP, what we want, or you're saying, hey, everybody on this call, what are you thinking there?
I'm thinking, bring me your wildest, craziest dreams. I'm thinking, like, if you have something that you're already doing, or you have something that you think is worth doing, and you bring it, you bring it to the table, we can look at ways to, again, find your who are the right partners that you're going to need, get you connected with those people. What is it going to take in terms of funding and time to make this happen? And is it something that we can scale down, right? Scale down to a pilot, so that way in a year we're ready to actually receive some federal funding and scale it up. Truly, like if it's something you want to do by yourself, then still bring it to the table so that we can just talk about it and know what everybody's doing. But maybe there's an opportunity to collaborate with somebody else that wants to do the same thing. We talked with Rebecca yesterday from TJ Ace about their digital skills. If we they mentioned that there's 20,000 people that need their assistance every year, but they have capacity for 800. So we can't tell them, like, okay, well, we need you guys to, and I'll say this because part of the reason that we can't just scale them up to 20,000 is that there's new people coming every day. And so you can scale them up, and there's still going to be new people coming that are going to need those skills. So you can't just do scale with one organization. Instead, what works best is to actually be in parallel. So if somebody's got a great idea, there's no reason why several people can't also do that great idea, as long as there's a population that you can target that maybe is going to be distinct. And even if there's overlap, maybe your lack of capacity means that it's better to actually find solutions where there's somebody else doing the same thing somewhere else, or this is a big surprise, or sharing the same space, but doing different thing, doing the same activity, sharing the same space, but being different organizations. All those things can be really, really effective at addressing the problem without necessarily always needing for the scale of the solution that we propose to be huge. So I didn't give any metrics there on what the different size boxes are, but if your idea is maybe your organization had a capacity to address 100 people a year, and we started with 20, then we get a plan to get you to 100 people a year, and you're still contributing to the solution at the pace that is right for you. So no idea is too wild. Chris, you mentioned IMLS. There's a lot of conversations happening about funding opportunities. They happen at conferences. They also happen on podcasts. I have not been that guy that manages a listserv that throws lots of stuff at you guys, but I might in the near future, because again, we want to inspire you guys to just come up with ideas and see if there's a way that we can help you fund them. And so some of that might mean that if I hear about some weird little grant that some foundation somewhere has that's going to help fund IoT devices for raising eggs, right? Like I'll throw it out there as something like, hey, is this something that would be interesting to your organizations or somebody that you know? So any other questions? Anybody want to make fun of my art or bid? Anybody wants that on their wall? I think that other thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about are those 3 tent poles. I talked to Rebecca about this. In our area, the 3 tent poles that we got from the study that Chris helped us do with the university with UVA students, we had device distribution. People want devices, they can't afford them. We had fear, and we're going to come back to that one. And then we had digital skills. The fear is the interesting one. Seniors with lots of experience with computers because they worked and grew up and their entire professional lives were around computers, but now they're afraid because they don't understand the website, because the language that we use, the culture of the internet is completely different than when they were first using computers. And so fear is there. Fears about a device, a little tiny device that has all of your information. It's where you do your banking. It has people use their phone as their credit card. There's a lot of fear there. And there's also fear about making a mistake. Maybe you're not afraid about the device itself, but you're afraid that if you don't do the right thing, that something bad could happen. We hear those sorts of fears from students who are very, very comfortable with these guys. But then you put them in front of a laptop and they're anxious about, do they know how to do the right thing? They saw some people that use this app and it's so cool. And it's a different kind of fear. Some of it's fear of missing out, but they also have fear of making a mistake that costs them socially. And again, it's a different kind of fear, but fear ends up creating these barriers to connectivity that are harder to address than just giving somebody an instruction manual or buying them a new device. Instead, it's a kind of fear that the only way that we're going to solve it is actually through trusted partners. It's developing trust with community members to get them to want to address whatever their fear is. We're not going to get everybody. That's okay. But the fear one was one that we weren't expecting, but we've effectively planned for by having a coalition of trusted partners who the community has trust in. So think about that as you're thinking about, again, possible pilot project. For the other two, the digital skills, it looks a lot like what Rebecca and TJ Ace are doing. It's having a clientele that you're already doing something with, and it's just saying, we have set aside this space over here. And we have contracted with North Star, which is a digital literacy skills platform that is just unbelievably affordable. Their online components, they start from how do you turn a computer on and go all the way up to advanced coding classes. This is something that is really it's fantastic for wherever you are in your pursuit of digital skills. You can pick up North Star and go somewhere. But you just have to have that opportunity. Thanks, Celeste. You have to have that opportunity. You have to have that space to do it. So that's a big piece. That's a big piece. And we want to find ways to help people get there. The device distribution is actually a trickier one. It's one that has a proven model, but we want to do it the right way. What we want to see is device refurbishment and distribution. Lots of laptops come into all of our offices. And then in a few years, sometimes, the business just says, oh, your old laptop, here's a new one. You can keep your old one and scrap it or do whatever you want with it. Some people, you give it back, they drill a hole through the hard drive, they rip out the RAM, and then they actually auction them off to resellers. Or sometimes you don't own your laptops. Your company doesn't own your laptops. You lease them. That isn't the case for the county. And I don't believe it's the case for the city, but those devices, especially at places like Willow Tree and the university, we don't want them to leave. We don't want them to go somewhere else. What we'd like is to actually see them get captured, get recycled here locally, and then get redistributed here locally. A lot of programs, and Kayla's on here, and we talked about the possibility of them doing a drive where they would do some loaner devices. They would expand their loaner device portfolio. A lot of times when you go to Dell and you say, I want to do a great thing for my community, I want to give away 50 laptops, they're going to put together a package that's going to be really attractive for buying 50 laptops that you can loan or give away, but those devices are going to be outdated. They're going to have a very short shelf life before they're not going to perform particularly well. You don't need to give everybody out there a really high-end laptop, but if you take a decent 3-year-old laptop, it's still going to beat the pants off of a low-cost $100 laptop, and it's going to last longer as long as it has been taken care of well. So refurbishment programs really have 3 benefits. One, you're keeping the devices local, so they never leave. 2, the work can be done locally. So you're creating jobs. These are not that might sound high tech to put RAM and a new hard drive and a new operating system in, but these are not high tech jobs. They're not necessarily the most well-paying jobs, but they're a really, really solid start for somebody that wants to get into technology. And then lastly, when you give those devices back out, they're devices that have been tested and proven to work well. There are companies that can help us with this. I want to bring them to the table at some point. They need 2 different anchors. They need one anchor to be the anchor that's going to commit to providing devices. And then they need a nonprofit. And the reason is that the way that this cycle works for everybody, because everybody needs capital, is that the company that's giving their laptops has to be able to donate them to somebody in order to get that tax write-off. So they want to donate it to the nonprofit. The nonprofit then gives them on contract to the refurbisher. The refurbisher does this work, and then the refurbisher actually donates them back to the nonprofit. And I know that sounds like a little hinky, but in that process, the refurbisher is actually going to generate revenue that's going to cover the cost of getting all of those devices back on the street. And you end up with this relatively low cost to the nonprofit. So you need those 2 anchors, somebody that's going to provide those devices, and then somebody that's going to be able to be the nonprofit hinge for this little cycle. So that's how we foresee us addressing these 3 pieces. Device refurbishment is going to have to include device distribution is going to have to include that refurbishment piece. Fear, it's all about working with our trusted community partners. And then the digital literacy skills, the way we see it is we have lots of partners who are already doing this work, and we just want to find capacity to expand your ability to do digital skills training. Sue, you've been really quiet. I'm going to go ahead and pick on you and just say, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm just listening for an opportunity that it would benefit our clients or the citizens in Charlottesville, or how we can advance the effort. And just to be clear, at least in the Department of Social Services, our computers are state machines, actually. So we wouldn't be able to donate them anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
But the city does have a large amount of e-waste, including laptops that we might be able to tap into.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, I don't know if everybody's met Alex. Alex is actually with the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation, and so I did bring her in as a funder to come and talk to us. Alex, what do you think about the things that we've talked about? And in particular, how do you feel do you think we've accurately described the role that funders can have?
Yeah, I think so. And, I think we're sort of unique in the community foundation space in that we don't really think of ourselves as just a funder. We really think about ourselves as a partner in this work. And so, for example, if organizations are applying for other grants, think of us as an opportunity for letters of support or ways that we can help partner to strengthen applications. I think that we see that just as much as a part of our role in terms of building capacity across our community. And think of our resources just beyond financial. And I had shared with Jason, there are some other funders in our area that I think could be interested in some of this work as well. So even if we don't have a grant available at this moment, there could be some co-funding opportunities that I think we'd be interested in.
Absolutely. And before I go to Rebecca, I'll just say there's been this like looming request for funding opportunities from somebody that I know that's at the university who just has a funder. Like they have a funder that is already funding them, and every once in a while they get an email from them, they get a call from them like, hey, is there something in the digital equity space in a certain price range that we could fund? And it's one of those things where you just think about it, like somebody's waiting to spend $150,000. They're waiting for the opportunity to spend $150,000, and you're just like, well, I would love to just come up with something for you to spend on, but I don't have anything right now. And the thing at the time, the thing that I told them is, when it comes time for us to need a match, $150,000 sounds great, because matches for grants are really hard to come by sometimes because you can't look at your own pockets and say, oh yeah, I can cover that. So having a funder to step in for that would be amazing. Rebecca?
Something I started thinking about, and it's when you mentioned, Jason, about using your phone to buy stuff. I think along the lines of digital literacy, there should be a combination of adding financial literacy to it as well, because so often the individuals that we're trying to reach don't even have bank accounts. They don't, they get their money some way, and then they're using money orders, or they're using that. I have met people who never saw a credit card before, and I come from West Virginia, so and part of that fear is because they're not familiar with banking systems and online payments and all that kind of stuff. That's going to have to be incorporated into the digital literacy as well, because that's probably why you're hearing a lot of people saying, no, I don't want this, I don't need this, is because they're thinking, well, I don't even have a bank account, why would I need to make online payments and that kind of stuff? So I think financial literacy is also part of what we're going to be dealing with as well.
Yeah. Jen?
Sorry, I have so many questions. So Jason, when you're talking about that kind of funding, like with Alex, hi Alex, what about the near term thing? And of course, my obsession with digital navigators, that is, train the trainer is $10,000 from NDIA. Is that it? And it's not innovative. It's not, certainly the outcomes can funnel all kinds of other pilots that would want to integrate digital navigators or organizations that want to have them on board, or their current outreach teams to become digital navigators. Is that stuff that you're thinking is not really, this is not the domain to look for those kinds of things, or for train the trainers? Or
I think that's actually definitely a space that you can find both low lift grant funding, and potential opportunities for funders that want to that are willing to step in for something small like that, especially if you can expand the capacity. You know, that $10,000 from NDIA, they'll let you invite a lot of people. So if you stepped in and said, hey, $10,000, there might be some people here at the table that might be willing to chip in, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Mike, that might be willing to chip in and just say, okay, well, like, let's cover, let's divide this up and let's just cover, we're going to bring 10 people to the table, and you guys are going to bring a bunch of people, and maybe the library wants to send some people, and then you can actually have something that has that bigger impact, right? That single drop that turns into a big splash, because we can expand the impact of that small donation. And again, I think that's where having this coalition, where you can go to a funder and you can say, like, hey, I really want to do this thing, and oh, by the way, if I do it this way with my coalition, then this can have an impact in a really broad swath. I think that could actually be really compelling. There was one thread that Chris mentioned that slipped away from me, and I've just been killing myself about it, because I'm just like, no, there was something I wanted to talk about, and now it's gone. All right, I am not gonna lie, I have meetings until 4:30. So I'm going to be willing to cut this one short. I think this has been a really, really great conversation. I appreciate each of you for joining, and I appreciate everybody's comments. Kayla, you kept coming on and off. Do you want to say anything real quick?
No, just that attending this meeting made me think, oh yeah, we applied, or Catherine Fay, our reference and services manager, is the one who the reference department applied for those grants, and I just discovered that we got them. So
that's awesome.
And both the digital literacy workshops and the ACP program. So don't know what that means. I don't know what the parameters were of the grants, but excited to move forward with that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna connect with Catherine, and I'm gonna force her to come to one of these meetings and tell us all about it next time. So one conversation we haven't had is, why aren't we talking to the providers? We're gonna bring the providers to the table. So straightforwardly, providers see digital equity as a revenue driver. That is the equation for them. That is all that they need to know. More people being online means more revenue for them. So they're in favor of it, and their willingness to invest is growing where they think that they can expand their actual footprint. So I think that is something that we need to start taking advantage of. And I think that the right way to do it is carefully, because what you don't want to do is get really close with an ISP, and then find out that a specific grant that you really want requires you to have never, ever met somebody from an ISP. And so I have had meetings with Ting and Comcast, two organizations that are already active in our area and that want to do more in the digital equity space. And what they've told me is they're willing to let us run the show and tell them what to do. And to a certain extent, it has to do a lot with the fact that they want to be friendly with whatever we're doing, because they also want to be ready to move in when the opportunity is good for them. So don't be surprised if you hear something about Ting and Comcast getting involved in digital navigating and other digital equity spaces. And if you think that there's an opportunity to partner with one of them, don't hesitate about it. Like, talk about it, bring that conversation to the table. We can still find ways to find other funding somewhere else for any other activity that you want to do. But don't hesitate if a provider comes and gives you a really sweet offer to do something that's going to be really impactful, especially if you can write a case study about it and we can all copy the same thing and do it too. But with that, anybody else have any closing comments?
Wait, real quick on that topic, Firefly, just spoke with them last week, speaking of providers. They are required by all their huge amounts of money that they just got to do digital literacy, and they haven't started a whiff of it, and they want us to tell them what to do with that money and their resources. So if you see an email from me asking you to join a meeting, say yes.
I'll say yes. I will absolutely say yes. That is that sparked it for me. Chris, you were talking about workforce. Network to Work has been sending a handful of locals, community members, to North Carolina I don't know where they're paying for it, but they are paying for these guys to go down and get trained to be fiber splicing techs and installation techs. They've done 3 classes so far. So 12 community members have already been trained, come back. It's 8 weeks. They're covering, I think, all of their costs while they're there, which is tremendous. And they're coming back and they're getting jobs with local teams, which is huge because we have a plan to address to reach universal broadband access by 2025, which means if you've noticed, lots of crews driving around with these big orange and black coils on the backs of their trucks, and guys with big stickers that say Rappahannock Electric Cooperative on the sides of their trucks. That's us. That's them going to go do this work. The state has slowly, the first meeting that we had about how they were going to spend their BEAD funding, they said 100% of all of the first year of funding will go towards unserved. And then very quickly they were like, actually also underserved. And then very quickly they realized, like, no, actually what the federal government wants us to do is actually to see if we can group some of the most important pieces. So workforce is going to be directly attached. What you can expect out of the last BEAD funding request in our area, and we're going to work to make this happen, is that it's going to come with a workforce element. So a Firefly or a Comcast or a Ting can't come and say, oh, we want to build to these 25 houses right here and just leave it at that. No, they have to come to us and say, we're going to build to these 25 houses, and we're going to pay for 5 people to go get fiber tech training. We're going to partner with Network to Work to get 5 people to get this training. We're going to get 5 people to go through a network management class. That's the kind of stuff that this funding has the opportunity to do, is attach more of these digital equity pieces to deployment. And then to actually expand on that, the state also pointed out, oh yeah, affordability can also be included. So affordability ideas, programs to address device acquisition, those are all going to be included in that first round of BEAD funding, basically because that's what the federal government wants us to prioritize, is grouping BEAD with grouping deployment with these other activities. It's really when you get down to those the other end of the lollipop where you're like, okay, well now we just need everybody to learn skills, that those things probably aren't going to be covered in that first year. Device refurbishment acquisition, that's going to be harder to cover in that first year, but that's where Digital Equity Act is going to be available. So if you have something that ties with our expansion project, and I'm looking at you, Jen, for that one, because a lot of your clients and a lot of the things that you address are in those rural fringes where we don't have access yet, and where it's coming. That's a great opportunity to sort of grab onto the deployment side and see if you can string along some of the adoption and equity side things. So yeah, so thank you for bringing up workforce there, Chris. Yeah. Anyone else? Last time. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to try to send a summary of all of this. If you guys don't see it by tomorrow, Jen, I'm going to task you with hitting me upside the head, because this is now you're all actually getting a call to action. So I want to see more people volunteer to help with the authoring and get everybody's heads churning on some pilot project ideas. And if you have a pilot project idea, send it to me. Even if it's just a nugget of an idea, send it to me. We can talk about it. We can expand on it. I'm going away for 3 days next week, which is a perfect time for me to just sit and obsess over somebody's good idea. So by all means, send them away. And Chris, enjoy Belgium and Italy. And yeah. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.